Well, that's a very important question. I must say, I smiled inside when you said the United States and other developing countries. It's not easy, okay? It's not easy because if I understand it correctly, I think Japan has actually two sides to this question that need to be differentiated because I think they are different. On the one side, Japan, I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong, Japan is saying, look, we are an industrialized country that has only 4% of global emissions. There is another industrialized country that has 22% of global emissions that is not bound by the Kyoto Protocol. And we're both industrialized countries. And that industrialized country has much more global responsibility. Hence, there needs to be a comparable effort here. And that level of comparison of effort is a very justifiable and understandable comparison that Japan needs. Different from that is the very understandable argument also that in addition to having comparability across all industrialized nations, there also needs to be a certain fairness with respect to the participation of those developing countries that are now very quickly becoming or have already become large emitters. China being the first there. And that's also a very justifiable conversation. The comparison between those two that's apples and oranges. One thing is Japan's need, understandable, to have comparability with the United States, and another thing is with China. And how to do that is not easy to figure out, but it is clear that although those are very important political differences, that if we're to see it from an environmental integrity point of view, from the atmosphere's perspective, it's very clear that we need everyone to participate. That the participation will have to have differentiating characteristics, I think, is also very clear, but that everyone needs to participate is absolutely fundamental. So how we will be able to put all of those pieces of the puzzle together, I think remains the challenge, certainly of this year and maybe even beyond this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And from the EU point of view, I think there's a choice here about how you approach the negotiation. I mean, do you say you first, not unless, we'll do this if you do that? Or do you say, we're going to do this, and how about you? And which way round do you look at the negotiation? And I think the EU's view is from, it's in our security, prosperity, and also in terms of the actual emissions point of view, in our interests, that we commit unilaterally. We commit anyway. We're going to do this, and that it acts as a pressure on other countries to do their part and to be ambitious. And that's the way round we see as the right approach to this issue. And I think, you know, as I said earlier, I know that Japan shares the same goal, but I'm not sure that the approach that Japan has at the moment to the negotiations is the same. And there are various reasons for that, and there are various costs as well. You know, this is not an easy. None of this is easy. It's a real challenge. But I think the EU, from an EU point of view, we would want to say, as developed countries, we're taking our responsibility, and we're going to commit to these emissions cuts, and then and then from a position of strength, if you like, we can say, okay, how about you? How about the US? How about China? How about India? How about Brazil? How about the other big emitters? Now it's your responsibility as well. You know, we only have this much responsibility for global emissions, this many percent, and you have this many percent, and we're committing to this. So how about you? and that's a strong position from which to sort of encourage global action. That's the EU's position, I think.
Maybe one or two more questions. Yes, the person there.
Alex Luta, I am from the Tokyo Institute of Technology. I have two short questions for Christina Figueres. First of all, as Mr. Oppenheim pointed out, that we are only 60% on track to achieving the 2-degree target. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I think South African Deputy Minister for the Environment and Water Affairs came to Tokyo, and she gave a talk at the end of her tour in which she was saying that the COP that's going to take place in Durban is going to be a conference for Africa. You yourself pointed out that it was also a good thing that finally adaptation was figuring very highly on the agenda of the conference. I would like to ask you then, when does, or through what channels does work on continued mitigation commitments continue? Yes, that's question number one. And question number two, there's been some voices from the South African civil society saying that they were very disappointed with the fact that the lead ministry on the COP was not the Ministry of Environment and Water Affairs, but was the Foreign Ministry. Have you encountered any particular, are there any issues stemming from this, that the lead ministry is not a technical ministry, but it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Thank you very much.
Let me answer the second question first. It is absolutely the purview of a host country to decide which ministry will take the political lead and who will become COP president. President Zuma has decided that the Minister of Foreign Affairs will be the COP president and that the Minister of the Environment will be the head of the South African delegation. As we know, both roles are very important, and he has chosen to divide the roles in that way, which is, by the way, exactly the same way that Mexico divided those two roles. They also had the Minister of Foreign Affairs be the COP president and the Minister of the Environment take the lead on being the head of the Mexican delegation. So we look forward to working with both ministers in their respective roles. We thought the collaboration between the Secretariat and the Mexican government with both of those ministers was an excellent collaboration, and we look forward to doing the same with South Africa. It is also within the purview of a host government to give the overall flavor, if you will, to a COP. And in that respect, just to give you an example, the overall flavor that the Mexicans chose to give to COP16 was a flavor that, contrary to all other COPs, was much more inclusive of private sector, of subnational governments, and of civil society. They really reached out much, much more than any other COP government had done to include the voices of those other stakeholders. And I believe that the process was enriched by that. The COP presidency in South Africa, as you say, is expressing a desire of the continent of Africa for COP17 to have a real flavor of adaptation, and that's not surprising, since certainly for the African continent, and in particular for sub-Saharan Africa, adaptation is absolutely a survival issue. So it is not surprising that, that they would put that flavor on the COP. Having said that, that does not mean in the least that all of the important agenda items are not going to be treated at COP17. Absolutely, there is a commitment of South Africa and of all other governments to move forward with the mitigation agenda, as has already been agreed to in Cancun. and because of, as we have already discussed here, because of the realization that we currently only have 60% of the commitments. So I have no fear that, despite the fact that in a very justifiable form, South Africa would like to emphasize adaptation at the COP, I have no fear that that would mean that they would then let mitigation drop off, since, in fact, it's also very clear that there is an intimate link between mitigation and adaptation. The quicker we mitigate, the less we will have to adapt. The longer it takes us to mitigate in an adequate level, the more it's going to cost us in adaptation.
Thank you very much. The next will be the last question or comment, please.
My name is Kimoto in the environmental business. I believe that majority of the audience is an expert, but I'm really a novice. So let me ask you a rudimentary question. In conferences negotiating environmental issues, as has been rightly pointed out by Executive Director, the answer lies at the changes or the shift to a new energy structure, as pointed out by Richard as well. But energy security issues and climatic change issues are often mixed up at the negotiation table, and that is making the situation more difficult for the citizens to understand the development of the negotiation. Politicians in charge of negotiating will be listening to the opinions of the general public as well. So I think that you should be taking some PR strategies or something to make it easier for the general public to understand the negotiation, as well as the progress in the negotiation. Thank you.
That's absolutely true. I very much agree with you that it is difficult to follow negotiations. From the Secretariat point of view, we have a program that reaches out to the press. In particular, we have a program that reaches out to media in developing countries, and we have now for several years been investing in our relationships with the media to help the media, in particular in developing countries, but also in developed countries, to provide them with the tools so that they can better understand the negotiations and can better report on the negotiations. But I certainly agree with you that we still have a long way to go. The issue is a very complex issue. It has many different facets, and it's not easy to report on something as complex as this, and it certainly is not easy for the public in general that doesn't live and breathe climate change 26 hours a day. It's very difficult for the public to follow this. So I certainly agree with you, and the Secretariat is very committed to working with media to make it a little bit easier for you.
I think her question is sometimes we mix up energy security issue and climate change security issue. So could you explain how we can differentiate and how we can make the best of use of those kind of synergy